I try to help people understand, like, there is an exponential here, and like the unfortunate thing is you only get to sample it every couple of years because it just takes a while to build supercomputers and then train models on top of them. And so the next sample is coming, and like I can't tell you when, and I can't predict exactly how good it's going to be, but it will almost certainly be better at like the things that are brittle right now, where you're like, oh my god, like this is a little too expensive or it's a little too fragile for me to use. Like all of that gets better. Like it'll get cheaper, and like things will become less fragile, and then like more complicated things will become possible. Like that is the story of each generation of these models as we've scaled up.
Okay, so what we just heard was Kevin Scott, the CTO of Microsoft, telling us that scale is going to continue for the foreseeable future. Now, it might sound like this is inconsistent, and of course, if you look at commentators on the internet like Gary Marcus and Ethan Mollick and that sort of thing. Sorry. There's not really any inconsistency yet. So Bill Gates has said that we're going to get, quote, 2 more turns of the crank before the current scheme runs out. So basically, not GPT-5, but Bill Gates is saying that GPT-6 is going to be when scale plus multimodality plus transformers really starts to diminish. Now, of course, these are different opinions from different perspectives. As many of you in the comments pointed out, Bill Gates was wrong because, like me, he thought that, initially, Bill Gates thought that transformers weren't going to go that far, and then he said scale is basically all you need. And now he's saying only 2 more cranks of the turn, or 2 more turns of the crank, rather. Sorry. And then Kevin is saying the next model is going to show that scale persists. So that is still consistent with Bill Gates is saying. And then as Gary says, is that Mira Murati, who is was CTO of Microsoft. Sorry, CTO of OpenAI, good grief. She is saying that, like, okay, we're pushing dates back a little bit. Now, all that's fine. And so it's like, it's a little bit more confusing out there, which is sure. I can understand that there's a little bit of hesitance or trepidation or even irritation because of the mixed messaging that we're getting. Now, of course, some people have been out there saying from the outset that, AI is BS and AI isn't doing anything. And now I have said that like AI is slowing down. So let me just show you the report that I'm referring to when I say that AI is slowing down. Now, when I say that AI is slowing down, first, the cadence of large releases is absolutely slowing down. We went from GPT-2, 3 to 4 relatively quickly, but now we're at like 4.2. And they're only just about to start training 5, plus maybe another 6 months of safety. Although now that a lot of the safety people are out of OpenAI, it could be that GPT-5 is released far faster. But at the same time, costs are increasing exponentially. Now, I've seen that some people out there try and squint really hard and interpret this as a good sign that, exponentially increasing costs means that AI is accelerating. No, that's not what that means. This means that, yes, companies are willing to speculate about the value of AI, the future value. And we are in a race condition where it's basically, you keep up or die, you grow or die. But at the same time, this trend is very, very clear. Now, there are also papers out there and models out there being trained using distillation. But at the same time, the frontier models still outperform those. And when you get a distilled model that is much smaller, such as, Llama 270 billion, when you get those smaller models, they're modeled on the insights gained from those frontier models. So reading the writing on the wall, yes, GPT-5, maybe even GPT-6, and that could be like, Claude 4, Claude 5, might stay on the current trend. But also, if this cost keeps going up, the only people who can afford to train these models are a handful of tech giants. That means Microsoft, that means Google, that means Amazon, that means Meta, and maybe a couple other ones. And so you can't tell me that with these costs going up exponentially like this, that it's going to keep going. Just by virtue of the fact that, only 5 to 10 companies could possibly even do this research, let alone publish it and release it. Now, another set of theories that I've seen out there that I want to address is that companies are hiding it or suppressing it. There's an outside possibility that OpenAI has decided to delay the release of GPT-5 until after the election. I kind of doubt it. It doesn't make sense from a business perspective, but it also doesn't even make sense from their own personal safety record. at least now that Sam Altman is completely at the helm. Basically, they're just going to release it as fast as possible and say it's on you, whatever you do with it. And they'll have safety filters built in. But also there's been some posts from like Jan LeCun and others pointing out that it appears that Russia is using AI augmented bot farms already. Go figure. Who could have guessed? That I'm not like, okay, great. They're whatever. I don't really care. And I've actually even seen some tweets out there where it's like someone basically did prompt injection with a Russian troll bot, and it was really funny. And then also sometimes the Russian troll bots will run out of tokens, and they'll start sharing like the "you are out of tokens" message on the tweets. Pretty funny. I don't know if it's real, but it's funny. Yeah. So all that being said, we are just in this phase of the costs are rising exponentially. There's not an infinite amount of money. Eventually, shareholders are going to say, hey, you're investing hundreds of millions, if not billions, into AI. We need to dial that back if there's not results. And a lot of people in the market are pointing out that like we haven't really seen the results yet. The costs are rising exponentially, but the revenue is not rising exponentially for anyone except Nvidia. I'm not saying put out puts on Nvidia or short Google or anything. This is not financial advice. But anyways, my point is look at the data. Like, yes, the costs are rising exponentially. Yes, the parameter count is rising exponentially, but the capabilities are not rising exponentially, and neither are the returns. So there's basically one inevitable conclusion that I have for this, which is that investment in AI is going to cool off. Excitement and hype around next generation frontier models is going to cool off, and it's going to also be commoditized relatively soon. And so what I mean by commoditized, rather than big iron, right? Like, hey, we've got the next big flagship model. We're going to get to a point where everyone knows how to produce a useful model, and then the market is going to get super saturated with fungible models. So what I mean by a fungible model is just like servers or network switches, where it's like, hey, you can buy a Dell, you can buy an HP, you can buy an IBM. They all more or less do the same thing. Likewise, within probably, if I had to guess, on a commercial side, and again, science, frontier science and R&D, that's very different from commercial engineering. So on the commercial engineering side, within a year or two, I think we're going to standardize around some LLMs and multimodal models that are basically like, hey, you can go to Google, you can go to Microsoft, you can go to OpenAI, you can go to Amazon, and they'll all provide LLMs that more or less do exactly the same thing and provide more or less exactly the same set of functionality. The fact that they are all accessible via API means that this next stack next component of the compute stack, because you've got like CPU, RAM, network and storage. That's kind of the four fundamental food groups. Next is going to be LLMs. That's going to be the CPU of the cognitive computing era, which is what we're entering into. And again, I'm not saying that the deployment is going to slow down. Deployment is going to accelerate. So the commercial uses, the commercial integrations, that 7-year adoption cycle that I more or less predict, and of course it could be a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. The pressure is there for it to be faster rather than shorter, but still it takes time for regulatory compliance. It takes time to build up internal centers of excellence in companies. There's a lot that has to go on inside corporations in order to make all that happen. That will accelerate, but the progress of frontier models will absolutely slow down based on the data that I'm seeing. And then also, it's entirely possible that people like Kevin Scott are just like, he's just trying to self-soothe. He might actually believe what he's saying, and it might be an emotional reaction because he's like, hey, I want to believe this narrative. But I also don't really see much inconsistency between him, Bill Gates, and Mira Murati yet. I do think that time will tell, as it always does. But yeah, so that's kind of my current take on what Kevin Scott and others have said on the rate of AI progress. And also just looking at the data, if costs go up exponentially, something's got to give. So that's my take. This has been your personal Chief AI Officer, David Shapiro, signing off. Have a good one.